The drone hovered above my head while I was driving the tractor. That annoying buzzing caught me by surprise, making me jerk the steering wheel abruptly and nearly topple over in the freshly plowed field. I squinted against the morning sun to get a better look at the little white quadcopter watching me. I soon recognized the golden emblem of the Bellas Vistas Condominium Residents Association printed on its side. Diane, again. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. I rubbed my sweaty face and sighed. At 38, I inherited this farm from my dad, who got it from my grandfather. 3 generations cultivating organic produce on this land, long before that fancy condominium popped up on the other side of the road. And now, I had to deal with this woman who thought she could control everything and everyone around her, even outside the limits of her own property. It wasn't the first time Diane, the almighty president of the association, tried to extend her jurisdiction to my farm. It started with letters complaining about the smell of the animals. Then came complaints about the tractor noise on Sunday mornings. I ignored them all. My property wasn't part of her condominium. I never signed any contract with any association. The drone came down even lower, only a few meters away from my tractor. It was like it wanted to say, "I'm watching you." I stopped the vehicle, got out, and gestured irritably at the drone. The damn thing just went up a little and kept watching me. I realized it was recording everything I did. That night, as I was feeding the chickens, I heard a strange noise coming from the livestock pen. I ran over and found chaos. My calves were terrified, running in every direction and knocking over the fence. Above them, the same drone from earlier was zigzagging, spooking the poor animals with its buzzing and flashing lights. It took me nearly 2 hours to calm the animals down and fix the broken fence. The damage was considerable, but what bothered me most was the invasion of my privacy. That drone wasn't there by chance. The next morning, while I was having coffee on the porch, a shiny black car pulled up at the farm entrance. Diane got out, her high heels sinking into the soft dirt. She wore an impeccable blazer, carried a clipboard, and walked as if she owned the place. "Good morning," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I noticed some irregularities on your property that we need to discuss." "Diane, we already talked about this. My farm isn't part of your association. For now," she replied, pushing her sunglasses up on her head. "But our condominium expansion is under discussion, and adjacent areas might be incorporated for the good of the community." Before I could answer, my neighbor Harold appeared. At 76, he was the most sensible person around these parts. He walked calmly over to us, leaning on his cane. "Diane," he said with a forced smile, "you know you're out of your jurisdiction here, right?" She completely ignored him. "Anyway, I'm leaving this notice regarding the improper use of chemicals. We've received some concerning reports." "What chemicals? My farm is completely organic," Harold laughed. "She's bluffing, son. Always does that with the newbies." Diane left the paper in my hand and went back to her car. Before getting in, she turned around. "You know, my drone has been capturing some very interesting images around here. Maybe the environmental department will be interested in them." After she left, Harold shook his head. "This woman is only getting worse. Ever since she became president 3 years ago, it's been a nightmare. Last week she fined Mrs. Jenkins for having yellow tulips instead of red ones. What can I do? I don't want any trouble, but she's clearly harassing me. In my day," Harold said with a twinkle in his eye, "we knew how to handle aerial invaders. That sprayer of yours, the big one mounted on the tractor, still working?" I glanced toward the shed where I kept the farming equipment. The old sprayer had been sitting idle for months, in need of repairs. "It works, but it needs adjustments." "Why?" "Because, my boy, sometimes the best defense is a good offense." The next day, the drone returned, this time flying over the pasture where my sheep were peacefully grazing. In minutes, panic took hold of the flock. The sheep ran in every direction, knocking over another section of the fence. 3 of them escaped onto the road, almost causing an accident. When I finally managed to round up all the animals and returned home, I found an official envelope from the Residents Association at my door. Inside, there was a formal letter suggesting the alternative community use for my underused property. It mentioned commercial interests and potential residential development. That's when I understood. Diane didn't just want to control me. She wanted my land. That same night, Harold and I decided to get our hands on the sprayer. While unscrewing the engine cover, I explained the full extent of the problem to my neighbor. "It's not just a privacy invasion, Harold." I read the letter carefully. "Diane is suggesting that my farm would be more useful as a recreation area for the condominium, or, even worse, as land for new mansions." Harold nodded as he cleaned a rusty valve with a cloth soaked in oil. His hands, marked by decades of rural labor, moved with the precision of someone who knows every bolt on a machine. "I'm not surprised," he replied, adjusting his glasses. "The same thing happened with old Peterson before you came along. The difference is he was in debt and ended up selling. Diane pocketed a nice commission from those developers." I fell silent for a moment, processing the information as I checked the sprayer's tank for leaks. So, I'm not her first target? Far from it. The Gutman's farm, now that ugly commercial center. The widow Simmons' place. Diane has a pattern. First come non-existent regulations, then the drones, then veiled threats of lawsuits. A lot of people simply don't have the energy or money to fight. We finished the basic repairs when it was well past midnight. The old equipment was far from perfect, but it worked. Before he left, Harold looked at me seriously. "We have to be smart. Diane has connections with some local council members and knows how to make people's lives a bureaucratic nightmare. We need to catch her in a clear mistake." The next morning, I woke up to the familiar buzzing over my house. Not one, but 3 drones were circling the forming property. I noticed one of them had a professional camera attached. They were systematically mapping every inch of my land. Instead of reacting impulsively, I headed for the shed to prepare my response. I mixed a solution in the sprayer's tank that we had developed the night before. Water, diluted organic molasses, and a compound made from cornstarch. All natural, biodegradable, and extremely sticky. I started the tractor and attached the sprayer. While driving into an open field, the drones seemed to notice my presence and began following me. Perfect. I drove the tractor in wide circles, as if I was just working normally. The drones kept their distance, filming every move. Gradually, I increased my speed and adjusted my position until I was directly beneath the first drone. With a quick move, I activated the sprayer. The sticky mixture arched perfectly, hitting the first drone right in the face. Its rotors were immediately compromised by the gooey substance, and the drone began to lose altitude, crashing like a rock in the alfalfa field. The other 2 drones hesitated, as if their operators were confused about what had just happened. I seized the moment to reposition the tractor. Another well-placed spray, and the second drone came down with a dull thud near the beehives. The third drone, the largest one with professional equipment, tried to escape, quickly gaining altitude. But I had practiced the technique with Harold. I cranked the sprayer's pressure to the maximum and aimed slightly ahead of the drone's path. The sticky cloud formed in the air, and when the drone tried to pass through it, its rotors were completely obstructed. It spun out of control before falling close to the edge of my property. I turned off the tractor and walked over to the downed drones. They were rendered useless, coated with the viscous mixture that hardened quickly when exposed to air. I picked up all 3 and placed them in a cardboard box. In one of them, I found a memory card that I managed to remove before the mixture could damage it. I didn't have to wait long for a reaction. 2 hours later, a small convoy of luxury cars pulled up to my farm's entrance. Diane was at the front, accompanied by 2 men in suits who looked like lawyers and 3 condominium residents I vaguely recognized from town meetings. "This is vandalism!" she shouted as soon as I approached, her normally composed face now twisted in rage. "Do you have any idea how much each one of those pieces of equipment costs? We're talking over $10,000. I kept my expression neutral. "What equipment? Don't play dumb. Our drones. You deliberately took them down with whatever crap you're using over here." "Oh, you mean those unidentified devices that were illegally flying over my private property, scaring my animals and damaging my fences," I said, pointing toward the barn where 3 calves were still being treated by the vet after yesterday's panic. One of the lawyers stepped forward. "Mr. Campbell, the use of drones for community purposes is perfectly legal and not on private property without consent," I interrupted. "And certainly not to harass animals or surveil citizens on their own land. Besides, Sheriff Parker will be very interested to hear about this." As if summoned by my words, a county sheriff's cruiser pulled up on the dirt road. Sheriff Parker, a 45-year-old man with whom I'd had a cordial relationship ever since our families attended the same church, stepped out of his vehicle with a curious expression. "Any problems here?" he asked, adjusting the belt where his badge was clipped. Diane immediately switched to a completely different posture, smiling sweetly. "Sheriff, it's great to see you. Mr. Campbell here destroyed valuable equipment belonging to the Residents Association, and we're here to resolve the issue." Sheriff Parker looked at me, raising an eyebrow in question. "I found some drones hovering over my property, scaring my livestock and causing damage. When I was spraying my fields with an organic solution to protect the crops, the devices flew straight into the spray. Unfortunately, they got damaged. Parker scratched his chin thoughtfully. Ms. Holloway, did you have permission to operate those drones over Mr. Campbell's property? As president of the association, I have a duty to monitor all adjacent areas that might affect our community. That doesn't answer my question, the sheriff insisted. Mr. Campbell's farm is outside your association's limits, and, according to federal and state law, you need explicit permission to fly over private property below 120 meters, especially if you're filming or photographing. One of the lawyers grabbed Diane's arm, whispering something in her ear. She looked visibly irritated, but nodded. Then we'll resolve this another way, she said, forcing a smile. But don't think it's over, Campbell. As the group returned to their cars, the sheriff came over to me. What really happened here? Exactly what I said, but there's more. They aren't just spying on me. They're trying to force me out so they can take my land. I handed him the letter I had received. Parker quickly read it, frowning. This is concerning, but unfortunately not illegal. Suggesting an alternative use for your property doesn't constitute a direct threat. As long as she doesn't do anything blatantly illegal, my hands are tied. I understand, I replied, disappointed though not surprised. Keep a record of everything, he advised before leaving. If she crosses the line, let me know immediately. That night, I inserted the memory card I recovered from the drone into my computer. Most of the files were footage of my property, clearly mapping every structure, fence, and field. There were spreadsheets with value estimates, notes on possible violations, and, most disturbing of all, an early design showing my farm transformed into an extension of the condominium, with luxury houses replacing the organic vegetables that once grew there. Harold came over for dinner and we reviewed the material together. This proves her intentions, but it still isn't evidence of an illegal act, he concluded, taking off his glasses and rubbing his tired eyes. 3 days passed without any sign of Diane or her drones. I started to wonder if she had given up, but Harold warned me. When Diane goes quiet, that's when we need to worry the most. He was right. In the early morning of the 4th day, I was awoken by the frantic barking of my dog. I grabbed a flashlight and went out to see what was happening. At the edge of the property, I saw moving lights. I approached cautiously and caught Diane and 2 men fixing signs along the fence. Even in the dim light, I could read, "Property under seizure. Contact the Residents Association." "What do you think you're doing?" I shouted, shining my flashlight on them. They froze like deer in headlights. One of the men dropped the sign he was holding. "We're just marking the correct boundaries," Diane replied with false confidence. "Our topographic survey indicates that this part of the land is common area." "That's a lie, and you know it. I have the original deeds for the farm that clearly show the property boundaries." "Well, we'll have to let the courts decide, won't we?" she answered with a venomous smile. "In the meantime, these signs will stay. Get off my property now, or I'll call the sheriff for trespassing." Reluctantly, they left, but the signs remained. I tore them down as soon as they were gone, but the message was clear. Diane had moved from harassment to an outright attempt to take my land. The next morning, Harold showed up with a newspaper in hand. It was the monthly bulletin of the Residents Association, normally distributed only among condominium residents. A friend of Harold's who lived there had given him a copy. On the front page, there was an aerial photo of my farm taken by one of the drones, with the headline, "Big Announcement, New Community Initiative." The article, signed by Diane, talked about incorporating underused adjacent areas for expanding recreational and residential spaces for our growing community. Even worse, it announced a party that coming Saturday at the condominium club to present to the residents the expansion and revitalization plans for the decaying rural area that has been harming our property values. "She really thinks she can just take my land by decree," I muttered, incredulous. Harold smiled enigmatically. "I think it's time we cooked up a new recipe for the sprayer." On Saturday morning, the day of Diane's party, Harold arrived at the farm early. He brought with him a mysterious box and a determined gleam in his eyes that I hadn't seen since our battle with the Residents Association began. "What do we have here?" I asked as he set the box down on the kitchen table. "The solution to our problem," he replied, opening it carefully. Inside were several bottles containing a fluorescent powder in different shades. Organic, biodegradable dye. It's used at color festivals in India and totally safe for people, animals, and plants. But most importantly, it glows brilliantly under black light. I furrowed my brow, confused. "And how does that help us?" Last night I did a little investigating, Harold said, pulling his cell phone out of his pocket. Look at these pictures. The images showed Diane and two of her assistants roaming around my property in the dark, installing small stakes with colorful ribbons and markers. Some were near the house, others were outlining what looked like a large rectangle in the middle of my most fertile field. They're marking off lots, I finally explained, starting to understand. Diane is already dividing my land like it's hers. Exactly. And even better, I found out that tonight's party isn't just an announcement. She's planning to take potential investors on a tour of the property early tomorrow. There's even a real estate agent ready to talk about development opportunities. My blood began to boil. She really thinks she can sell my land without my consent? Her plan is to create so much social and legal pressure that you'll have no choice but to sell. I've seen it before. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to process the audacity of it all. What do you suggest then? Let's use this, he said, pointing to the dies, to expose her scheme in front of everyone. Tonight's party will have all the condominium residents, the mayor, several council members, and, according to my informant, even Sheriff Parker was invited. I objected. But we can't just spray people directly. That might land us in legal hot water. We don't have to. We'll target the gardens around the club. The markings Diane made last night were done with a special ink that will react with our dye. When we switch on the black lights, everyone will see exactly what she planned. As the sun began to set, we made the final adjustments. I checked the tractor's fuel and the pressure on the sprayer system 3 times over. Harold headed off to infiltrate the party, taking several portable black lights that he'd strategically place around the area. Remember, wait for my signal, were his last words before he left. When the garden lights flashed 3 times, it's showtime. I was left alone with my thoughts as darkness set in. Part of me wondered if we were going too far. But then, I remembered the images of my farm, divided into lots, the drones scaring my animals, and the constant threats. This land wasn't just a piece of property. It was my heritage, my livelihood, my future. At exactly 8 o'clock, I started the tractor and slowly headed to the farthest edge of the property, where I could observe the condominium club without being noticed. The party lights shone brightly, and even from a distance I could see dozens of well-dressed people entering the venue. I waited patiently, watching. My cell phone buzzed with a message from Harold. Everyone's here. Diane's about to take the stage. Sheriff is present. Be ready. 15 minutes later, I saw the signal. The garden lights flashed 3 times in sequence. It was time. I revved up the tractor to full power and drove straight toward the club. As I neared the wall that separated my farm from the condominium, I activated the hydraulic system that raised the sprayer to its maximum height. The equipment now extended well above the wall, ensuring that the spray would cover the club's gardens. I heard shouts and exclamations as people noticed the sound of the approaching tractor. Some pointed, others ran to see better. On the makeshift stage, I could see Diane frozen in the middle of her speech, microphone in hand, staring in disbelief in my direction. I activated the sprayer, and a fine mist of the fluorescent solution spread over the gardens in a graceful arc. I maneuvered the tractor slowly, ensuring full coverage of the area. People stepped back, some worried, others just curious. Suddenly, all the garden lights went off, Harold's doing, and black lights turned on at strategic points. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The entire club garden lit up with fluorescent markings that formed a perfect map of a subdivision. Lines outlining streets, rectangles showing lots, even numbers and prices glowing intensely in the dark. And the most impressive part was that the markings didn't stop at the club's garden. They continued beyond the wall, onto my property, forming a full-scale development plan that engulfed my entire farm. The normal lights came back on, and chaos ensued. People pointed in shock at the markings that were now visible even under normal lighting, thanks to the intensified reaction from the dye Diane had used. I saw Sheriff Parker pushing the crowd toward Diane, his face a mask of serious professionalism. I turned off the sprayer and began reversing the tractor. My part was done. Now it was up to justice to take its course. The next morning, Harold showed up with some fresh donuts and a bottle of apple cider to celebrate. We sat on the porch watching the sunrise over the fields that were still mine. "That was spectacular," he said, biting into a chocolate-glazed donut. "I've never seen so many people left speechless at once." "What happened after you left?" "Oh, it got even better than we expected." Sheriff Parker immediately confronted Diane about the markings. She tried to deny it, of course, saying she had no idea how they appeared. That's when I showed him the photos I took of her marking her property last night. I nearly choked on my cider. "You showed the photos in front of everyone?" "Even better." Harold smiled. "I showed them to the sheriff, and he then asked everyone present to stick around and give statements. It turns out that several condominium residents had no idea about her plans to take your land. Many were furious to learn that their condo fees were being used to finance the drones and the whole scheme. I shook my head, still processing. And Diane? The sheriff took her in to give a formal statement. This morning, I got word that she was temporarily removed from the presidency of the association, while an internal investigation is underway. It seems she broke several association rules, along with state laws regarding illegal property demarcation. 3 days later, the media storm reached its peak. A local newspaper published the story, and it was soon picked up by regional websites. The video, recorded by a guest at the party when the fluorescent markings were revealed, went viral on social media. The hashtag #DianeGate became a trending topic in the area, but the final blow came unexpectedly. While we were cleaning up the drone remains for proper disposal, we found another memory card that had been lost in the initial confusion. It contained even more incriminating evidence. Videos of Diane faking tears and rehearsing emotional speeches about how she fought hard to protect the community, clearly preparing herself for when her actions would be questioned. Harold, with his mischievous wisdom, sent the video to his nephew who worked at the catering company, the same guy who helped him infiltrate the party. The young man, active on social media, posted the material with the caption, "How a Residents Association President Practices Lying." In 24 hours, the video had amassed over 1 million views. A week after the party, I received an official notification from the Residents Association. Diane had been permanently removed from her presidency. Robert Jensen, a 40-year-old resident known for his balanced approach, took over on an interim basis, and his first action was to send a formal apology to the property owners affected by Diane's actions, including me. The Bellas Vistas Condominium Residents Association formally recognizes that your property is outside of our jurisdiction, and we commit to fully respecting the legally established boundaries, the letter read, signed by Robert. Sheriff Parker also came by to inform me that a formal investigation had been launched against Diane for several charges, including attempted real estate fraud and document forgery. "We found pre-prepared sales contracts on your computer for the lots of your farm," he explained incredulously. "She really believed she could force you to sell or simply take your land." That afternoon, I sat with Harold on the porch, drinking iced tea and watching the fields that my family had cultivated for generations. The sheep grazed peacefully, no longer disturbed by drones. The air was clean and quiet, save for the occasional chirping of birds. "You know," said Harold, leaning back in his rocking chair, "my grandfather used to say that the land always finds a way to protect itself through those who truly love it." I raised my cup in a silent toast to that wisdom. The battle had been won, not just by me, but by everyone who believes that some traditions deserve to be preserved, that not everything can be bought, sold, or taken by force. And what about Diane? I heard she put her house up for sale and plans to move out of state. Apparently becoming an internet meme wasn't in her 5-year plan. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. In the distance, a tractor was working in a neighboring field, reminding me that life continued at its natural pace. Just like the seasons, conflicts come and go, but the land remains for those who respect it. And as for Diane, I heard she put her house up for sale and plans to move to another state. Apparently becoming an internet meme wasn't part of her 5-year plan.